Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar presented by the Vancouver Island Human Rights Coalition. The focus of this webinar is on age discrimination and human rights law in BC. In this webinar, we will cover three primary topics. 1, what is ageism and age discrimination? 2, specific issues facing people of advanced age. And 3, how to combat ageism, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. So what are ageism and age discrimination? Ageism is generally understood as stereotyping and discrimination against older people because of their age, with a distinct valuing of younger people. Like racism and sexism, ageism reflects negative assumptions about people because of a single characteristic, in this case their age, rather than treating them as a unique individual. Ageism is a complex phenomenon with three primary components. First, prejudicial attitudes towards seniors. These assumptions include the perception that older people are frail, cognitively impaired, or no longer living productive lives. Second, discrimination against seniors. This is where the prejudicial attitudes are acted upon, thereby producing negative effects and inequality. Thirdly, institutional norms supporting stereotypes and reducing the opportunities of seniors. This involves stereotyping becoming entrenched in policies and procedures so that seemingly neutral decisions produce discriminatory impacts. So one example of ageism could involve two grocery store employees who are overheard talking about being driven crazy by old, slow people who shop on the weekend. They just shouldn't be allowed in at certain times. This interaction is ageism and involves prejudicial attitudes against seniors. It's unclear if it would be discrimination, since it doesn't necessarily produce a negative impact depending on their behavior. But if a senior were to overhear the conversation and felt harmed by it, then it might be. Age discrimination means treating someone negatively or denying them a benefit because of their age, whether they're old or young. So age discrimination could include denying an older worker a promotion or training opportunity because they might only work for the employer for a limited number of years before retiring. It could also involve denying a younger worker a senior position because they look young. So a clear example of age discrimination could involve a job interview. If a well-qualified senior were to apply for a job and the interviewer denied them the job because seniors don't learn technology as quick as the younger generation, this could be discrimination. The interviewer ought to evaluate the applicant's credentials and abilities on an individual basis and not stereotype them because of their age. So the BC Human Rights Code is what's known as anti-discrimination law. Under the BC Human Rights Code, all people are protected against discrimination in 5 areas of life. These areas are listed on the right side of the slide, while the protected characteristics are listed on the left. According to the BC Human Rights Code, discrimination occurs when someone is treated differently because of a protected characteristic in a way that affects them negatively. So age is included as one of the protected characteristics in the code. And while this webinar focuses on age, we also recognize that age can intersect with other protected grounds. For example, disability frequently overlaps with age in human rights complaints. The BC Human Rights Code defines age as 19 or older. So therefore, it is not discriminatory on the ground of age, at least, to bar someone from doing something because they're younger than 19. This is relevant for things that involve minimum age requirements, like buying alcohol or tobacco. If not for this distinction, these requirements could be challenged under the Human Rights Code as being discriminatory. There are also some other exemptions for distinctions based on age when they are permitted or required by legislation or regulation. The code allows some differential treatment based on age, such as seniority schemes, certain employment benefit plans, and insurance premiums or benefits. So a clear example of this is the area of tenancy. As a rule, landlords cannot refuse to rent to someone because of their age. They also cannot evict someone because of their age. However, there are some situations where age distinctions are allowed. Things like senior housing are protected via the BC Human Rights Code, meaning that a landlord can restrict rentals to people who are 55 or older. So if a 45-year-old were to try to rent a house or an apartment in an area designated as senior housing, they could be refused, and that refusal would not be discriminatory. Now let's focus on some specific issues that face older persons. Employment. Stereotypes about older workers include assumptions that they are less ambitious, less hardworking, or less dynamic, or even that they're more resistant to technological change. These attitudes and assumptions place older workers at risk of experiencing discriminatory treatment in the workplace. Interestingly, research has shown that age discrimination in many industries starts at the age of 35. Age discrimination, then, is not just limited to seniors, though of course it is more prevalent for older workers. Housing. The normal physical changes that occur as people age has implications for housing. In designing housing for older people, developers should aim for a barrier-free environment and recognize that barriers are often physical. Examples of inclusive housing could include building ramps along with stairs, where stairs are necessary, building the steps lower, and keeping paths and walkways in good condition and clear of obstructions. In institutions like nursing homes, the needs of some seniors are not addressed. For example, gay and lesbian seniors might have trouble finding safe and comfortable facilities where they feel safe to fully express themselves. In other cases, certain seniors might find that there are no facilities that address their religious, cultural, or linguistic needs. And healthcare. The right to be free from discrimination in healthcare applies to healthcare services and facilities. This includes hospitals, clinics, community care access centers, long-term care facilities, home care, and healthcare programs. Attitudes in the healthcare system can impact the level of quality for services available to older persons. Unfortunately, older people are sometimes unfairly seen as a drain on healthcare services or as being too time-consuming and difficult to serve. There may be a tendency for the medical system to normalize the health concerns of older persons, such as assuming that a health problem is normal for a person of that age and therefore not worth treating in the same way as it would be if the person were younger. Fundamentally, older persons have a right to the same level and quality of healthcare services as anyone else. The Supreme Court of Canada has made it clear that those who are responsible for healthcare services and other services to the public must take positive steps to ensure that disadvantaged persons benefit equally from those services. This requires designing services and facilities to be inclusive and barrier-free for older patients. Healthcare organizations need to identify ageism as an obstacle in providing quality healthcare. There are many examples of ageism in healthcare. One such example is that older patients are less likely to be offered angioplasty and heart bypass surgery than younger patients. This might be because older patients have poorer outcomes and more complications than younger patients. But some of it is just ageism and the notion that older people have lived their lives and that care for younger patients ought to be prioritized. Another example is that older patients admitted to hospital often experience longer delays than younger patients. Compared to younger patients with spinal cord injuries, older patients are more likely to experience delays in their treatment. Specifically, it takes twice as long for older patients to go from their injury to being transferred to a spinal cord treatment center. And COVID. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the exclusion of and prejudices against older people. The COVID crisis has highlighted a disturbing public discourse about aging that questions the value of older adults' lives and disregards their valuable contributions to society. The ageist attitudes circulating during COVID have driven a perception that the pandemic is largely a problem for older people. Older people have been depicted as vulnerable and helpless against COVID. High mortality rates amongst older people are considered an inevitable and even a normal outcome of the pandemic. This devalues the lives of older people and frames them as a drag on society. We need to avoid making age-based assumptions during the pandemic. When older relatives do not have underlying risk factors, the same safe practices that should govern all social encounters, wearing masks, washing hands, maintaining physical distancing, can be employed to protect them. Visits should be guided by older relatives' actual health and physical condition, not by assumptions about vulnerability that are associated with advancing age. And finally, intergenerational solidarity is important to maximize the support and connectedness of all persons during COVID. Safety measures need to be followed, but social isolation is also a serious concern, both for the young and the old. Finding ways to stay safely connected, such as virtual or outdoor visits, can be a helpful lift during this difficult time. And combating ageism and age discrimination. To combat them, it's necessary to raise public awareness about their existence and to dispel common stereotypes and misperceptions about aging. Age impacts individuals differently. Each person's situation and experiences are different, and as such, there is no way to generalize about the skills and abilities of a person based only on their age. The principles of human rights require that people be treated as individuals and assessed on their own merits, instead of on the basis of assumptions and stereotypes. People should be given the same opportunities and benefits as anybody else, regardless of their age. At the same time, ageism can be addressed by changing prevalent common practices through inclusive planning and design, which reflect the circumstances of persons of all ages to the greatest extent possible. The Supreme Court of Canada has recently made it clear that it is no longer acceptable to structure systems in a way that assumes youth. Rather, age diversity should be reflected at the design stage. When policies, programs, services, facilities, and so forth are being developed, so that physical and systemic barriers are not created in the first place. And where those barriers already exist, they should be identified and steps taken to remove them. So one such example is crosswalk lights. These are timed for how long it would take a young, able-bodied person to cross a street. These often fail to take into account how long it might take an older person or someone with a disability to safely make the crossing. And finally, it's important to remember that the experience of age discrimination and ageism may differ based on other components of a person's identity. For example, certain groups of older persons may experience unique barriers because of their age in combination with their gender, disability, sexual orientation, race, color, ethnicity, religion, culture, and even language. We need to identify these barriers that result from the intersection of age with other identities and take steps to remove them. We're all aging. It's a natural consequence of time. To be anti-aging is to be anti-living. As individuals, we can all make a difference. We can actively seek to raise awareness in ourselves and in others, challenging our assumptions and our passive acceptance of ageist attitudes. We can then take this awareness into our workplaces, designing innovative systems and practices that are of value to us all throughout our lives. If you feel that you are currently experiencing discrimination, or have in the recent past experienced it, you can contact us by phone or by email. The Vancouver Human Rights Coalition is a nonprofit community organization located in downtown Victoria that helps people access the BC Human Rights Tribunal. We provide 3 core services. 1, we help people file human rights complaints to the tribunal. 2, where this doesn't work, or if you want a more formal approach, we can try to resolve the discrimination informally. This usually takes the form of providing information and resources to employers, landlords, or service providers that explains their duties and responsibilities under the BC Human Rights Code or the Canadian Human Rights Act. And 3, we provide educational workshops and presentations, such as the one that you're now viewing. These are meant to help people understand their rights and responsibilities under the BC Human Rights Code and the Canadian Human Rights Act. You can visit our website and Facebook page for more information and to find other resources related to the BC Human Rights Code. Thank you for listening.